I'm just outside of Pokrovsk here in Donbass in Ukraine. Now, it's been a really difficult couple of weeks for the people of Pokrovsk as little by little the Russians have been inching closer and closer to the city. Even as I was driving in, you could see lines of people leaving the city as the evacuation started just a few days ago.
The situation here is not stability. Really big power from Russia's side. Step by step going inside now. We have only 8K for Russian position, and every day they use some ballistics, some caps, and a lot of drones around here. It is a very bad situation.
Bad situation here in Pokrovsk. We're in Kherson right now. Just spoke with the general of police. You hear little booms in the background. The Russians were only a few kilometers away. We're right by the river, the Dnieper River. We're dropping off some medical supplies to some guys here before we take off. It's eerily quiet here. That's the team. Kherson.
Welcome to our friends from all around the world. This is DW with Ukraine Story, inviting you for what is for me a very special edition of Ukraine Story podcast. Today I'm speaking with our executive producer, Honor Phillips, who happens to be my son, from Gdansk, Poland. Last time I saw Honor, we were in Paris, having just exited the Paris 2024 Olympics, hence my hat that I'm wearing here today as a memory of that very special 2 weeks that we spent with athletes from Ukraine and athletes from around the world. But upon leaving Paris, Honor, you left and you traveled to a very, very different part of the world. So first of all, hello, how are you today? How's life in Poland?
It's great to be back on the air with you. It's a beautiful day here in Poland, and like you said, I'm still fresh from the Olympics. I still have all of that in my head. And now, of course, we have the Paralympics, which has been going on over this last week. And we've been able to revisit all those wonderful sights and sounds which we saw before. I'm not in Paris for that, obviously. I'm here in Poland, but it's still a tremendous thing to see.
Interestingly enough, Ukraine has once again been dominating, even stronger at the Paralympics than they did at the Olympics, and they did very well at the Olympics, going from basically a 44th position in the world in past Olympics down to the 22nd, which was a 100% increase, and walking away with 12 medals, which was very, very significant. But by just a couple days into the Paralympics, Ukraine was just coming right up there at the very top once again. And I think something that's happened, my opinion, is that the emphasis or the openness to Paralympics has grown exponentially this year. The interest of the different nations, especially Ukraine, competing. I mean, here you have people that are in many cases missing limbs that are coming from a world where you have more than 100,000 Ukrainians that are missing limbs, more than 100,000 as a result of the war. Not to say that all the Paralympians receive that because of the war, but they're competing and they're drawing attention to this sport. It's exciting. It's wonderful. And if you are a viewer and you want to learn more about Paralympics, definitely take a deep dive because it has become a great fascination, especially Paralympics rugby, which is already concluded. All right. From going from the Paralympics into the middle of war. Talk to me about this. What has happened in your life over the last 2.5 weeks? Here in the United States, we've been tracking with you on a day-by-day basis, and our heart has been with you and the team. And every day we walk away grateful because you've come out strong and well. That hasn't been the story for everybody in those same regions. Walk me through the last couple of weeks of your life. Where have you gone? Why did you go? What happened?
Sure, absolutely. So about a month ago, I was speaking with some mutual friends of ours, and I got connected with a fantastic team of guys from Poland. Now, they're actually from Poland and the UK and a collection of all different places, but this team was founded here in Poland. And at the very beginning of the war, the fellow who leads this up by the name of Igor Trach, he is a European and world level champion in dog sledding with a sled, as well as cycling and racing and all things athletics. At the very beginning of the war, he was over in Ukraine and he was helping people with humanitarian aid, with everything you can imagine. He cares very deeply for the people of Ukraine. The people of Poland are like brothers with the people of Ukraine. So I got connected with Igor and I discovered this foundation he has. It's called Tracher Foundation, after his name. And they go to the front lines in Ukraine and they bring aid, equipment, everything from food, medical supplies to body armor and helmets to forward position units, as well as people all over Ukraine. So about 2 weeks ago, I went to Ukraine with Igor and his team, and we essentially did the whole circuit of the Eastern Front, I guess you could say. And we did just that. I was there as a volunteer, but also because of who I am and the nature of my work, also a documentarian. So taking pictures, speaking with people, getting stories. And it was a remarkable, interesting, and really positive time there with Igor and his team in the east of Ukraine.
Okay, so let me see, just to summarize here. This is a foundation you work with. As I understand things, Igor and his team has done this route or similar routes into Ukraine more than 70 times. So he's a real veteran, and his team are real veterans of a relief operation in Ukraine. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, Igor and his foundation have done, this was their 74th aid mission since the beginning of the full-scale invasion more than 2.5 years ago. 74 times he or representatives of his team have gone into Ukraine, and that might be Kiev on one instance, it might be Kherson, it might be Kharkiv, it might be anywhere in the east that he has taken aid and support and equipment. It's absolutely remarkable if you think about it. This means that essentially every month, sometimes twice a month, he's going back to Ukraine. And he's there until victory. People have asked him, how long are you going to do this? When are you going to get tired? And if you talk to him, he says, no, we're doing this until victory. So for me, it was an honor to be there with these guys, but it was also it was also a very moving and stirring moment as well, because we're in a difficult time in the war, a complicated time in the war, because on the one hand, you have the breakout in Kursk, the incredible push into Russian territory, which is turned on its head in many ways what Russia was expecting. And at the same time that you have these victories in actual Russian territory for Ukraine, at the same time you have what appears to be collapses in what were perceived to be the stable lines in the east of Ukraine. So it's not just a good or just a bad story, it's a mix. So to be there at this time, to be there in the east of Ukraine, was just it was quite a moment.
All right, I want to help our viewers by getting a sense of the geography of what took place with your mission over the last 2 weeks. Later on, I want to come back to Igor because he's such a really an inspiring and colorful character. And it really takes unique individuals that not only have the vision, but incredible amounts of professionalism and sort of smarts on the ground, a real sense of how to handle things on the ground to be able to navigate the difficulties of delivering relief to the front line of battle. But I've got a list here of some of these cities. Let me just go, tell me if I'm correct about this. Over the course of, almost 2 weeks, you went to Ternopil, you went to Vinnytsia, you went to Mykolaiv, you were in Kherson, you were in Kryvyi, you were in Dnipro, Dmitriivka, and then, of course, notably, you were in Pokrovsk, and you were in Kramatorsk. In fact, as I understand it correctly, you left Kramatorsk, and I'll let you elaborate on this, basically an hour before the bomb hit that took out the Reuters journalist, and tragically he died, and his team member was injured very seriously. You were in Izium, Kiev, Lviv, and probably a half a dozen other cities. I don't even know how it's possible to hit all those cities within 2 weeks. Did I get the geography basically right, even with my pronunciation?
Generally, yeah. Now, and I do just want to clarify that most of those cities we just passed through very, very briefly. We spent the majority of our time in 3 or 4 locations. So, to start with, we spent a good deal of time in Kherson and Kherson City, and in Mykolaiv, which is very close to there. So we bounced back and forth between Kherson and Mykolaiv for a few days. The next big stop we did was Pokrovsk. Now, Pokrovsk is in an incredibly difficult situation now because the Russians are really only a few kilometers away. If you stand on a hill, you could probably see them. It's thought that the Russians will be in the city. For Pokrovsk, when I was there, it was a really it was a tense moment because the Russians were just a few kilometers away. And it's thought that maybe they're going to be in the city in a week, in 2 weeks, maybe less, maybe more. The reason why Pokrovsk is so important both to the Ukrainians and the Russians is it's been one of these hubs in the eastern part of Ukraine and Donetsk. 3 big highways connect there. There's a rail station which comes through, and it's been a really important point for Ukrainian communications and supply. So if the Russians can take this, they cut that off for the Ukrainians. But also what it does is it potentially opens up everything behind Pokrovsk to further Russian advances. So again, we don't know exactly what will happen, but it's thought that the city is going to fall because they don't have enough defenses, they don't have enough manpower, they don't have enough equipment. So I was there just a few days ago, and you could feel it in the air that they're getting ready for this to happen. And I've never really experienced anything like that, but it was a very grim moment. Now, from Pokrovsk, then we spent a good deal of time in Kharkiv, which is up in the north of the country along the border with Russia. Then when we were finished in Kharkiv, we went through Kiev and then back to Lviv. So I spent the majority of time in Kherson and Mykolaiv, Pokrovsk, and Kharkiv. But
Let's go back to
I,
let's go back
yeah.
So let's go back to Pokrovsk and let's take a deep dive into this experience. The eyes of the world are on this little city, and the juxtaposition between what's happening with the Ukrainian incursion into Russia, which is a great victory at the moment, and what's happened in Pokrovsk is palpable. The distinction is so strong. You've told us a little bit about how grim it felt, how strange it felt, but walk me through the streets. Walk me through people that you met. Did you hear the sounds of bombs? Did you see any destroyed buildings while you were there? I think we're anticipating an entire city completely leveled when all is said and done. Walk me through your experiences, kind of moment by moment.
Well, I don't know what will happen with Pokrovsk. It's likely that a lot of it will be destroyed. It depends on how the Russians prosecute the attack on the city. When I was there, you probably, if you had the sound turned off, as it were, it probably wouldn't look too much different from any other Ukrainian city in the eastern part of the country or in Donetsk, except for the fact that there was basically no civilians walking around. I did see one probably 16-year-old girl walking down the street, and all of us looked at her like, "What are you doing here? Get out." But Pokrovsk seemed very empty. Now, at the same time, there are probably still 20,000 plus people who are still there in the city who have not left. But it did seem like a city that was turning into a ghost town. I didn't see any BMPs or any official military vehicles, but what you do see is you see lots of these pickup trucks which have been painted in military colors. These things are driving all over the place, um there's it sort of was like a ghost town. Stores were closing, places were being boarded up. And then when we went in there, we were dropping some medical equipment and other supplies to a unit which is stationed in the area. And it was just like that. We pulled up, we got out, we unloaded our gear, we handed it off to them. As we're unloading gear, every now and then you hear a pop in the background of something going off. But it actually seemed relatively quiet in an eerie way. Now, when I spoke to guys there, they said, don't be taken off guard by this. Stuff's flying over all the time. And it's that being said, it's not anything like what it will be like in a week and a half or in 2 weeks. But it did have a very eerie feeling about it. Um, if you go to other Ukrainian cities, you'll see trenches, you'll see sandbags for whatever reason. And there's been a lot of discussion about this, and there's been a lot of criticism from this from people in Pokrovsk and in the area, and Ukrainians who are in the discussion. There didn't seem to me, to my lay eyes, to be um, any real comprehensive defenses of the city, and I think this is a huge oversight. I don't know if this is a strategic decision or if this is um, just an oversight by commanders there. But to me, it looks like you could just walk into the city. But yeah, so you see military vehicles, you see these closed down buildings. Every now and then you'll see a civilian walking around. And there is this kind of hush because there aren't cars on the road. You only see a few cars here and there. Now, entering the city, there were long lines of cars coming out. And they were in groups of 4 and 5, and then 10 and 15, and then a mile would go by, and then you would see 20, 30 cars all driving together. And these were families which had packed up their homes, packed up their lives, tied it to the top of the vehicles, and they were driving out. The official evacuation was declared by the governor just about 3 or 4 days before we got there. So that's what that was. And that continues to go on now as we're recording this, actually. So people are picking up and people are leaving. But my guess is that by the time the Russians get there, there will still be at least 10 or 20,000 people there. We'll see, though.
Is this sort of the volcano syndrome where people living near a volcano don't want to leave their home? Somehow they think they're going to survive whatever comes up, or is it inability to leave? You and I have a very good friend who is presently serving as a soldier on the front line in the city. And we've been communicating with him from our different locations. I've been speaking to him here from the United States. And he was describing, one of the things he described for me in between commentary about nonstop bombing around him. And he would say, oh, there's a Russian plane. Okay, a bomb just dropped. Okay, another bomb just dropped. Okay, it's the 9th bomb that dropped. Then he would stop and he would describe some of the elderly in Pokrovsk who have lived there their whole life. They were born in the same home they live in today. And they have to flee. And they don't want to flee. They don't know what to do. It's such a comprehensive uprooting. His mother would be an example of that. Did you see examples of that, of older people that just didn't want to leave the town? Or was that not in your view?
I didn't personally speak with anyone who had that story, but I do think that's definitely the case here. Pokrovsk is a larger city comparatively to other villages near in the Donetsk region. So where this fellow, our mutual friend, where he is, he's in a place where the Russians are already pounding it. In central Pokrovsk, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more quiet. But I think that there is this sort of attitude all over. I mean, it's all over Ukraine, but I think it's particularly in the eastern part of Ukraine where people have lived lives here for, 50 years, more than that. They've grown up here. And there's definitely this attitude of almost resignation, like they've been through so much already. This issue of people not wanting to leave is like, I mean, it's like what you would have in any rural area in any country. You have people who have grown up out in the country, away from the big cities their whole life. They spent their whole life there. A lot of them are farmers. They don't have another place to go. Um, all their family are here, and because of the age demographic, a lot of these people are older, and so they don't have family to go to in other places. So a lot of them just think, I'll just stay here. I've been through so much already. I've been through 10 years of war, and I'm old anyways, so they don't leave. And it's a really tragic and difficult situation because there's this whole population which is stuck there. I mean, this has been true in many different places all over the east of Ukraine. That's been um, under in the firing line between Ukraine and between Russia. And it's sort of a difficult, a hard phenomenon which happens in this particular part of the world, where people just don't want to leave.
When you were there in the town, did you see stores that were still open at the time, or by the time you're there, they were all boarded up?
There were a few that were still open. Actually, when we were there, the governor of the area said, okay, on September 2, all the banks are closing and all the institutions are closing, only the ATMs will be open. So we were there before that came into effect. So now if you're in Pokrovsk, to my understanding, I'm not there, but to my understanding is financial institutions and like chains will be closed. Um, so things are definitely hunkering down. We were getting there, but it wasn't quite there a few days ago when I was there. Things have sped up very, very fast, and I think that they will get worse at an exponential rate the closer the Russians get.
Did you get to speak directly with any of the soldiers that were defending the city? And what was their attitude at the time?
Because of the nature of the work we were doing, I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with guys who were there stationed in the city. I did speak with a few guys who were in a brigade around Pokrovsk area, just like what you would expect. They weren't talking about defenses and battles and stuff like that. They were cracking jokes, and they were trying to solve as many problems as they could. One of them actually had a hand grenade somewhere rolling around in his gear, and he pulled it out, and it had all kinds of funny slogans and phrases written on it, sort of as just a humorous thing. And he passed it around. Everybody, look at the hand grenade. Don't pull the pin. But this is what we're gonna give to the Russians when they get here. So the guys I spoke with were humorous, but it wasn't without a very clear understanding that things are going to change very fast in the next week.
Anything more that you would say about this experience there? Because I think within a week or 2 weeks, this is going to be headline news around the world, especially if the Russians obtain their objectives. What is the benefit to Russia of actually capturing the city?
Again, from a lay perspective, from my general understanding, they are able to disrupt Ukrainian supply lines in a big way. It also opens their door to the highways, and it also means that all the cities behind it, because of the geography of Ukraine, and particularly eastern Ukraine, which is very flat, it's very agricultural, there are these cities which come up as linchpin cities. Either they're high ground or they are key economic transport communications hubs. Really, that's what a lot of this war has in the east, in the eastern part of the country. That's what it's been about. It's been about these hub cities. If you read some of the stuff that's been on some of their own Telegram channels, they're actually a little bit uneasy about why it's been so easy for them. It might be as simple as there were not properly prepared defensive positions, or it might be something else. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. One last thing I'll say about Pokrovsk is, as you mentioned before, we have a good mutual friend, a fellow who I met previously earlier on in the war. I've communicated with a lot. I know his family. He's a really amazing guy. I love this guy. And I was messaging him as I was coming into the city, and he said, and he just like unloaded and told me this whole story of why he's coming back. He grew up in Pokrovsk, and his family is from Pokrovsk. His father died there, and he's spent a very large amount of his life there in Pokrovsk. So when I was actually there, we were both there at the same time, and we were sending voice messages and sending pictures. We weren't able to meet up, but we were in communication the whole time. What he expressed was, "This is my home. This is my history. This is where I grew up. This is where my family is from. I have to protect my city." This guy, Max, he's been fighting for the Ukrainian army for 10 years since this thing first started. And Pokrovsk is not too far from a lot of these other cities, which have been key areas during the last 10 years of war. So if you're in Pokrovsk, you've grown up in the last 10 years of being very aware of being constantly affected by the war in Donbass. So I'm talking to him, "You're going to stay and defend the city." And he's like, "Yes, I'm going to stay and defend the city. It's going to fall." And he said, "I know. So how long are you going to be here?" "As long as I can. I'm going to fight as long as I can." And it was a very, I mean, this is my friend I'm talking to. But the emotion and the spirit and the heart he expressed it's kind of like the perfect example of the Ukrainian spirit. It's understated, but it is heartfelt and it's passionate. "No, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to fight like I have for the last 10 years. And I don't know what will happen." Like I said, his father's buried there. I had messaged him when I was in the city because we were near each other, but I didn't see him face to face. I had messaged him and said, "Hey, when I'm back, i.e. back in Pokrovsk, let's grab a meal. I really want to see you. I want to talk." And sort of tongue in cheek, he said, "The city will be destroyed. There will be nothing left. But if I'm still alive, yes, I would like that." It's funny, but it's also deadly serious
Mhm.
because he's not going to run away and he's going to be there. He's going to be there till the end. Again, we'll see what happens. But that's one of those moments which is always going to stay in my head. And I think it's representative of the kind of spirit you see of some of these fighters.
Honor, I think you and I share the same perspective that while animals are precious and to be loved and protected, that human life takes the priority, and protecting human life is important. But that doesn't mean that we don't care for the life of the animals. That's actually a Christian doctrine, something I believe in. I spoke with our mutual friend Max, and one part of his mission was actually to help retrieve people that were stuck in the city and to get them to positions of safety. But he told me that on one of his missions, in fact, he told me live with the dog next to him, he came back in to rescue this dog. And he sent me a picture of the dog. It was an absolutely beautiful white Ukrainian dog. And now he's looking for a home for this dog. Something I've been struck by through social media and through direct communications you and I have had is the passion that these people have for their animals. It's actually extraordinary. You see animals in the foxholes, you see cats, you see dogs, you see this love they have, how the animals are actually performing a service for the humans of giving them comfort, companionship in the midst of truly miserable circumstances. And you also see efforts to rescue animals. I noted today that Yaroslava Mahuchek, who I had an opportunity to interview for close to an hour, myself and some other press reps in Paris, the gold medalist in the women's high jump at the Olympics from Dnipro. She posted today pleading with people to support Ukraine because of the horrors of what happened on this night. This is September 4th is the time we're recording this. Last night was terrible devastation by Russians, the night before the same. But she donated a tremendous sum of money to animal rescue and relief in the midst of the war here in Ukraine. And it actually seems to do something for the national spirit that they're caring for these animals. I think you had a very interesting experience. Can you bring me in on it? Because you travel with not only an animal trainer, professional, but an animal lover, and you got to see animals, dogs and cats. And it's just one small part of the story, which kind of humanizes the reality of life in war.
Yeah, absolutely. You've never seen as many dogs walking around as you will in Ukraine during this war.
You and I are
And
both dog lovers. We love
oh my
dogs.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. If you walk on four legs, I'll have a treat or something for you in my backpack. But you've never seen so many dogs as you will in Ukraine, and a big reason for that is a a lot of the dogs who were previously pets are now they've had to be released, and it actually has started to become a problem because the breeding is so out of control that these dogs are everywhere. But you're absolutely right. There's a very lovely connection between the family dog and between the family in Ukraine, and you see this everywhere. Basically, every single stop I made, I would see these little groups of dogs, and they weren't mean. Everywhere I go, I stop, and there are these little groups of dogs that humbly come up to you and look for attention, look for affection, and it's very delightful. And I know it almost seems trite to talk about this when we're dealing with it with human beings, but in the same way that the human population has been greatly affected by the trauma of the war, the dog population has as well. And you see this like after an air raid attack, you can just see it in their eyes. They're shaking. These animals are. Again, people are the priority, but you can't help but your heart just go out to this massive population of dogs in Ukraine. Igor, our team leader, who runs Trotcher Foundation, he is a professional dog trainer and racer. He's world level and world class. He's one of the best of the best. And
When you're saying a racer, he's a dog sled racer. He doesn't have dogs in races, but he trains these dogs for sledding races and bicycle races.
yes, yes. So the dog sledding community is a massive community all over the world, and he is one of the highest ranked guys in this community. And there, after working with dogs his whole life, you well, any of these guys actually, you really grow a soft heart for taking care and for watching over these animals, because it's like with, like in the United States, the relationship people have with their horses, it becomes a mutual relationship there. It's not master to the pet, but it's a sort of a mutual dialogue of help and support and trust and all these things. So, you know, it was amazing seeing Igor out there interacting with these semi-wild dogs as well. When this is what he does as a living. But
Is he a bit of a
it's
dog whisper?
a
Is he a
part of
bit
the
of a dog
story.
whisperer? Is he a bit of a dog whisperer where he comes up and
I
they
yeah, I think there's definitely some of that going on for sure. For sure. When you raise puppies for 25 years, I think it rubs off. But it's, this is another part of the story of Ukraine right now. And that what you shared before about Yaroslava Mohuchik is and that's another prime example of that.
I see it over and over again. When people are in the most desperate situations, living in foxholes, they look to humor, they look to music, and they look to animals. The animals provide so much comfort and love. Did you see any examples of soldiers or of others that were, benefiting from animals, or was that not your experience on this trip?
Um, I mean, in a general way, of course, yeah, I didn't walk into too many places and see dogs running around in trenches, but I know that to be true. I know that it's true. And I think that if you talk to folks who had spent a fair amount of time in the eastern part of Ukraine, I think they would probably say that's true.
Let's go to Kramatorsk. You visited Kramatorsk. I was very glad when you exited Kramatorsk, when you did, and you did well. Can you kind of bring us into your experience there, what happened in that city, and
Yeah,
timeline?
yeah. So I was actually in Kramatorsk for a relatively short time. We had a meeting there. Um, we went into the city. Phone buzzes like it always does. Another air raid. We didn't think that much of it. We were in the city for a few hours, and then we went to just like one village over to grab a meal at one of these strange, it's the middle of a war, and there's nobody inside except for military trucks. And then somebody pulls up with a kebab stand, and all these soldiers show up to buy kebabs. It's very funny how this happens there. So we spent some time in Kramatorsk. The air raid was on. We were kind of looking around, but um, it didn't seem like anything was happening. And then we moved one village over. What we didn't know was that right after we had moved to this other village over to grab a bite to eat, like an hour or 2 hours, I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was the same air raid that had started when we were there. Um, it turned out that the Reuters journalist was killed there in a strike right after we left. So
How close in proximity were you to his location?
I don't know. I don't know. He was at a famous hotel there, which is it's a popular spot for journalists, and I couldn't tell you how far we were from there. But I do know that this is not unusual. Kramatorsk gets hit all the time. You remember the famous pizza place incident that took place there last year. It's sort of one of those things which comes with the territory, because the Russians do not care who they hit, and they'll seek out, find soft spots, weak points, whether that's a journalist, whether that's an aid group, whether that's double tapping after you've already hit a place. This is what they do. And the journalists there know that. But it was a tragic loss for this journalist, and also for the whole Reuters team, because this guy was very well known, and he had spent a lot of time out east. So briefly in Kramatorsk, but definitely felt it the next day when we woke up and found out that we had just barely missed, or we were there during the air raid, but we had just barely missed the rockets actually coming in.
I can't describe to you the relief I heard in the aftermath of your safety from Kramatorsk. Kramatorsk has been on my mind for a year, son, because I it was really one of the first times that on a very practical level I was alerted to the how indiscretion leads to death. So you have people in the pizzeria and they're posting on Instagram. Here we are. Isn't this great? Look at us. And it appeared as if, or at least some people concluded, that the Russians hit it after information was released on social media. And it's a reminder that one of the benefits of social media during the war is that you can let the world know, here's what's happening. You can build empathy, you can tell stories. One of the dangers is you can reveal positions and you can open up the door for fatality, because the Russians are using social media to target people. They have people that just scan that for the purpose of hitting civilians and journalists and others for the purpose of terror. Uh, do Ukrainians, how are Ukrainians responding on your trip to the Russian use of terror, the targeting of civilians, the express targeting of civilians? Did you hear much discussion about that?
I mean, you hear it all the time. It's a constant discussion. A different flavor depending on where you are in the country. If you're in Kiev, or if you're in Lviv, or if you're in Ivano-Frankivsk, it's one flavor, because they're not on the front line and they're not dealing with, um, you know, amputees and wounded guys coming back every day. So when they are hit, it feels incredible, and it is incredibly personal, specific, and direct. They're going after the people there. They're going after the civilian population, even if they throw in a police station or something like that to make it seem okay. There's been a very consistent process of terrorizing the population, at every opportunity possible. In the eastern part of the country, I mean, people have it's the war, so it's not that people have become accustomed to it, but it's constant. And so because it's constant, everybody just sort of gets it. When I was in Kherson, we were fairly, I could see the Dnieper River, and the Russians were right on the other side of the Dnieper River. So we were running from place to place to place, trying to stay out of the streets. and somebody actually had been killed that morning by a drone flying over and dropping an explosive on him, and the guy was killed right away. So in Kherson, it's one particular kind of feeling because they always feel like they're being surveilled. They always feel like at any moment somebody could just have a grenade dropped on them. When Kiev gets hit, it's also a very traumatic experience because out of nowhere you get an S-300 or you get some massive missile coming in and taking out an apartment block. That's its own kind of thing. Being in the east, in Kramatorsk, or even in places like Kharkiv, that's a whole, it's similar, but it's also a whole nother kind of feeling. So I would say yes, absolutely. The conversation on this in Ukraine is constant because everybody experiences this. Everybody does. But it's at different levels and with different flavors, I would say, depending on where you are in the country. But it's constantly talked about all the time. And people in Ukraine are it's like they're trying to get everybody's attention in the West, being like, hey guys, this happens every day. Hello, 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 wake up. And we need to listen.
During the early days of the war, people were going to great lengths to say, look, this is a targeting of civilians. This is terror. Look what they did at the hospital. Look what they did here. Of course, the Russians would deny everything. The American media really never did a deep dive into the concept of civilian targeting, a little bit, but at this point, you'll hear a headline now and then. But we were explaining in a recent article published by Ukraine Story that the horrors that took place on October 7th against the people of Israel by Hamas, those horrors, unimaginable evils, are things which take place in one way or another at scale in Ukraine every week, every month, at a level which is so much greater than happened on that one day on October 7th. That doesn't diminish from the horror of October 7th. It's simply to point out that we're living with one of the largest constant terror attacks of the modern age. And it's constant, and it's at a scale which is almost unimaginable. I think sometimes there are certain issues, if you talk about, which are difficult issues, and you talk about them with people, the enormity of the crime is so big they can't process it. They don't know what to do. And I think for a lot of Americans, it's a combination of the pro-Putin influence in American social media in certain areas, and it's just the fact they can't handle it. It's so horrible. It's so terrible.
I think it's both those things. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Kramatorsk, you went to Kherson. Can you tell me about Kharkiv?
Kharkiv was another fantastic experience. Well, fantastic isn't the right word. It was an amazing experience. I was actually on the outskirts of Kharkiv city the whole time. We were staying with a brigade which has forward positions actually up near Vovchansk. And then they drive out to the positions to do their work. But we were staying in a bunker with them on the outskirts of Kharkiv city. And we brought them medical supplies, we brought them body armor, we brought them all kinds of stuff. And people are saying, after everything, why do people still need this? Why do people still need this? The Ukrainian army is running out of absolutely everything. Every essential they don't have enough of. It's grown exponentially, and at the scale and at the rate this war is being prosecuted, it's only getting, the supply issue is only getting worse. It's not getting better. Obviously, here and there you see Stryker vehicles, and you see Western tanks, and you see things like that, but people in the West have not grasped the magnitude of what is involved in this war. So we were bringing, in a small way, equipment, aid, materials to this unit in Kharkiv city. One of our guys on our team was also a combat med, attack med instructor, so he had also been doing training different units on different combat medical procedures through the whole time. So we did some of that as well with some
So
different
you were
units.
doing, your team was actually doing you guys were actually doing training on this trip.
Yeah.
That seems
Yeah.
very valuable to me. Very valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So this again, this collection of guys from Poland, they come from all different backgrounds. Some are in territorial defense, some are, um, you know, medics. These guys, and they're from all different backgrounds, and they come to help Ukraine. So we were not only delivering aid and communicating and helping out in that way, but we were also, when I say we, guys on our team were also instructing in combat medicine and what's called March, which is like a immediate procedure after an incident, tourniquets, stuff like that. Because even though now this war's been going on for 2.5 years, a huge amount of the army is still basically just civilians in uniform. There's the famous line, wars are started by professional armies and finished by civilian ones. The Ukrainian army is basically a civilian army now, basically. And so they need all this stuff, and they need more. But that's what we were doing with some of the guys in Kharkiv. We ended up, like I said before, up near Volchansk, which has been a very hot spot for a long time, spitting distance from the Russian border. And this was it was had the honor to be able to see some of these guys in action. They were able to do a couple successful attack missions from this one drone unit, which I visited. And spent a fair amount of time with them in their positions. Um, it's for them, they are the most forward position in that area. So drones go up and they are over the Russian lines and dealing with them in that way.
Talk to me
We
about
ended up having to hightail it out there though, because they kind of goes in waves. The attack goes in waves. So the Ukrainians will send theirs and the Russians will send theirs. And then there's artillery firing the whole time. But the Ukrainians sent up their attack drones, had a successful mission, wasn't shot down. They took out the target. I was able to watch them do that. That was really something. And then they looked at the clock and were like, okay, incoming, everybody out. And we had to book it back to the cars and put it in gear. And there's all kinds of amazing tech which they have up there. It's remarkable because they're living in these dugouts, and when it rains, it gets muddy and it's a mess. And they'll also have just the most insane tech which they've invented or which they've come up with or found or sourced from somewhere, which helps them to fight this war. We run back to the vehicles, jump in the vehicles, because the guys are like, okay, they're gonna start their barrage now. And we have this like a drone finder, basically. And it goes beep, 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 beep. Look at the drone finder. It's in Russian or it's in Ukrainian. And the guys were like, okay, Russian FPV drones are in the air right now. Go. And so we booked it down this road, which was basically in the open. It goes in and out of tree lines. We were stopping behind trees, taking off again. This is one short moment for us, and this is every single day of the last 3 years for them. So I say this with a little bit of humor, because it was, even though there was risk, it was more humorous than it was anything else. And these guys are in the thick of true war fighting, real war fighting, and they have been for 3 years now. And it's not, unless we can kick it into gear here in the West, that will continue, and they will continue to have to live this way and fight this way.
going back into your drone escape story, from the time they say get out to the time you're safe, how much time has gone by?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know exactly, because it's like with all of this stuff, it's not like a heat-seeking missile looking for you. It's imprecise. The most hair-raising thing about this is knowing that there's a Russian dude with a set of goggles on the other end looking at all this. And he may have seen us, he may not have seen us. He may have looked at us and thought, no, I'm going to go for something else. Or he may have missed us altogether. That's actually the most unnerving thing about the whole drone warfare part of this isn't a grad rocket system, launching 10 rocket pods into the air and then exploding in the woods. This is literally a guy with goggles on and with an enough explosives loaded on this drone to take a armored personnel carrier out, and he's just flying around. Okay, I know the positions are here, I know the positions are there, what am I going to hit today? And of course they have anti-aircraft systems, they have all kinds of the Ukrainians do, they have all kinds of amazing countermeasures. Parts of the line, they have systems which jam the drones, so the drones fall out of the sky. They had, there were 30 millimeter, or what one of the guys said was 30 millimeter cannons firing like right nearby us. So the Ukrainians were hitting something. And you could hear, we were standing there. We had our helmets off for one brief moment, and we heard pop, 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 pop. And the guy was like, put the helmets back on. So we put the helmets back on. But so there are all kinds of ways to counter this, but it is a very odd thing. It's a very odd, unnerving thing to know that there's a guy, like I said, who could blow up an armored personnel carrier, and he's just flying around above you. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. We ended up these positions are forward positions, so it takes a while to get there. I think we only felt the intensity of the moment for about 25 minutes, because at that point we were out of range. But the
25 minutes,
hour,
25 minutes,
the
a million years.
sure, and also the hour drive, back to where we started. There's nothing there. There's nobody. It's just wasteland, and all the villages we drive through have been flattened. Actually, where we were was previously Russian held ground in Ukraine, but it had been retaken again. So that's part of the reason why it was so desolate, was it had been, the Ukrainians had taken it back. But it was the just again impresses on me the insanity of the way these guys are having to fight. The brilliance and the insanity. The insanity is they don't have enough equipment, they don't have enough supplies, they don't have enough of anything. And the brilliance is, even though that's true, they're making the best of it. I spoke with one commander actually in the dugout. We're in this covered position, and we're sitting there, and we're running a mission, and he's like, I bought that screen, I bought this controller, I I had to source this myself because that's where we are. And in the same unit, there were 19-year-old guys, and there were guys in their late 50s right next to each other. That's not normally how wars are fought. It was a very striking comparison, seeing somebody who looked like he could be my grandfather, and then seeing this kid who looked like he wasn't out of high school yet, right together, working alongside each other, same unit.
There's a movie that you and I have enjoyed, and it's called 1776. It's a musical. It's about the founding of America. And one of the more memorable scenes in the film has to do with the debate at the Continental Congress over whether or not they would have unanimity in voting for independence. And there's a lot of, and this is historically accurate, there's a lot of controversy and discussion about it. And one by one, Adams and Jefferson and the other founding fathers are trying to win people over, but they're having a hard time. One of the delegates from a northeastern colony ends up taking a trip, and he visits these farmers with muskets who are basically with no equipment except their farmer guns, and who are putting up a defense against the best armed military in the world, and they're being successful. And he comes back to the Continental Congress and he says, okay, I'm voting for independence because I never thought I would see what I saw. I saw farmers with pitchforks and muskets standing up against the best armed, best uniformed military in the entire world. And I think there's really something to that in the Ukrainian case, although we recognize that Russia is not what they claim to be, their military is not what they claim to be, their defenses are not what they claim to be. Nonetheless, they still are the military of one of the two great military powers in the world. But you have basically farmers with pitchforks standing up against Russia, and they're doing it successfully. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a really, really important point. I think that's a really important point. And it's a very striking thing being, you know, in forward positions in the east of Ukraine, because the reality is so the difference is so stark. You know, you drive 7 hours that way and you're in Poland. You drive 6 hours that way, you're in Poland or Romania. And these guys are fighting a war at a massive scale like this, and people aren't taking it seriously. But I think, I mean, we hear about this. We hear about this happening. We hear about guys coming, you know, people from the US, Republican, you know, representatives, Democratic representatives, they come over, they have an experience. And half of the time, these guys don't even go east. They just go to Kiev, and they see the spirit. They see the way people think, the way people speak, the bravery in the face of constant attacks, constant death, constant destruction. And it is infectious. Now imagine if those guys went east. If those guys went east and they drove past the burnout tanks and they saw the people getting carried back from the front line all the time, and they heard about how the ammunition is running out and how the equipment is not good enough, and they're still pushing on. I mean, that's not to put an overly heroic bent. It is heroic, but I mean, it's also incredibly messy, because war is very hard. This is what's so incredible about the Ukrainian story, is this is not an easy fight for them. What is so amazing about this is how incredibly difficult this is. Every moment it's difficult. A lot of these guys haven't had leave in 2 years, and they're still there.
I want to ask your
yeah.
opinion. This is an opinion question or observation. You've been involved in the fight for Ukrainian freedom now since the very beginning of the war. You've been in Ukraine now multiple times. You and I have had the opportunity to interview a lot of people, from just moms and dads to soldiers to people representing every demographic in Ukraine. Here's my question for you. What do you think? What do you think is the difference on the human spirit in terms of resolve and summoning up strength when you are protecting your homeland and your family versus when you're trying to take something from somebody else?
Thank you for that. I'll just clarify. I haven't actually been fighting in Ukraine. I've been supporting Ukraine with all the other ways.
By fighting for Ukraine, when we speak of that in one context, of course, we're speaking of those who are militarily on the ground fighting, and that's one thing. And God forbid there's any comparisons to that, because that stands on its own. But in terms of using words and images and stories to defend Ukraine in the international community, you have been doing that for 2 years.
Yes, yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I think to your comment, I think what you just said there is maybe the defining point of this entire war. It's the linchpin of everything. This is Ukraine. This is their home. This is their family. That's why they're doing this. They're not doing this for money. They're not doing this because they want to be tough guys. They're not doing this for any other reason. They're doing this because this is it. This is their home. The other guy, the Russians, there are 1,000 reasons why, and all of them are bad. But for the Ukrainians, if you really, you know, you can always find odd stories, and there's 100 different ways you could take it if you pick it apart. But if you just really boil it down, what's actually going on here? It's an entire population standing up to protect their country. their country, which is about the size of Texas, big in European standards, but it's all they have. There's nowhere else for them to go. This is their country. And I think if you've been in Ukraine, or if you've been following the war long enough, seeing that, knowing Ukrainians, that's inescapable to not hear that from them. All you have to do is have proximity to the war, to Ukrainians, or to the stories of the war to see that. This is about their country and defending their home.
A major piece of Kremlin propaganda, which has been widely circulated in the United States, is that the war in Ukraine is a proxy war. And by that, the idea is that it was created by the United States and it is run and managed and even dictated by the United States. How do you think a Ukrainian soldier, officer, person on the ground would respond to the idea that the CIA or the United States is directing this war in Ukraine? And by the way, did you happen to see any CIA agents while you were over there?
Well, I think if you were to propose to somebody, hey, are the Americans here? I think the first thing they would say is, I wish they were. I wish they were here. I wish they would come. To me, that argument is very old, very overworked, and at this point, it seems to me to be a get out of jail free card as to try to blind your eyes to what is happening there. I think it is America's duty that we stand by Ukraine. So in that sense, I think we should be standing by them and supporting them and involved in that way. I think we actually have a duty to do that. But for all these other CIA conspiracy type stuff, I think that they have just eaten up what the Kremlin has put out. And it's a shame because they are missing one of the most incredible stories of our generation of what is unfolding there. The people who do push that narrative are missing one of the most incredible, inspirational, heroic stories of our generation. And on top of that, I really think it's only able to have that position if you're safe in America, or if you're in St. Petersburg, or if you're in Moscow, maybe some places in Germany, being in Poland, being in England, being anywhere in Europe. You cannot escape how serious this is. You also can't escape how everyone is coming together to help with this. And there are all kinds of political, domestic issues and foreign policy stuff that goes on. That always happens. But I really think that you are either sinisterly negligent or just cowardly to continue to keep pushing those kinds of that kind of a narrative, in my opinion.
It's so interesting to me, Honor, that while you were in the thick of things, right near the front lines with drone groups and others in Ukraine, up in Kursk, Ukraine has blown the mind of the world. And they did this without the United States government even knowing about it. At least that certainly is the narrative that's come out of Washington, D.C. That's the narrative that's come out.
Yeah.
It's difficult to imagine. It's difficult to imagine that the same administration, which is denying the use of long-range missiles to go into Russia, would approve, so to speak, an incursion into Russia. It would seem to be completely contradictory that they would say, yeah, you can't use these missiles, but you can invade and take over 1,000 square miles of Russian land. It sort of defies reason. So I think the conclusion.
Well, that is the incoherence of the whole Biden administration managing of this whole thing. There's been there's been no vision for victory. And so you've had these very strange leashes put on, like don't fire into Belgorod, don't fire there, don't fire there. But what the Ukrainians did by going into Kursk, I think, really got the Russians thinking and got the Allies thinking again, because I think everybody was getting complacent, and I think it was it. We'll see how it turns out, but I think it definitely shook people up in a good way.
I think to the point of this conversation, it shows the independence of the Ukrainian military directive, that they're acting largely as an independent nation, making these decisions and taking actions that are incredibly bold, that they recognize that at the end of the day, the buck stops with them. They, as much as they need help from Europe and they need help from the United States, they cannot rely on help from anybody. And I think they know that. They're talking that way. They're going to keep asking for it, and they should keep asking for it. But at the end of the day, you can't trust other people for your outcome. And so what they have accomplished with this very bold move, getting back to the whole farmers with pitchforks fighting against, the well-decorated British troops during the War of American Independence, what these guys are doing is showing, is absolutely setting on end this idea that wars are won based purely upon parity or lack of equality of military technology. No, they're also won and they're defended on the basis of heart and soul and spirit and passion and resolve and other factors that are less quantifiable in military terms, but which have an actual impact on the battlefield. And I think your point is the biggest point, and that is that if we miss this, if Americans who claim to love freedom miss what's happening in Ukraine, we have missed the very thing that we believe made our country great, which is love of freedom and willingness to fight for it, which is love of family and willingness to fight for it, which is an unwillingness to roll over in the face of tyranny. That has been the American mindset and the American resolve. It is part of our national identity. For us to despise or to neglect or even to be apathetic about those who show this on such a grand scale, I think is a dereliction of our duty of what it means to be an American, and is really a shame on our country. It shows that we've shifted as a people from a people of freedom to more of a self-indulgent nation. And if we reach the point where we only care about freedom for ourselves to live wealthy, happy lives in our comfortable homes, we will lose all of those things in the name of our own self-indulgence.
I think that's well said.
Final observations on this trip through Ukraine.
At every stage of the war, people have said this is the most important stage of the war. And it may have been. We're in a very important stage of the war right now. Keep your eyes on Ukraine, and things will be changing very fast. We're about to have a new American president. Russians are watching, Ukrainians are watching, the world is watching, China is watching. Ukraine really, really, really needs support, and not just words about sending billions of dollars here and there, because most of the time, practically none of that even gets to them. We need clear and comprehensive, we need a clear and comprehensive path forward as to what the American position will be. So keep your eyes on Ukraine. Things will be changing very fast. Things will be changing very fast, probably for good and probably for bad, probably a little bit of both. Let's see what the next months have to come. Also, as we were just talking, remember the cities which are currently in the middle of it. Remember Pokrovsk. Remember the people there. Remember the people in Kharkiv who get hit every single day. Every day they get hit. The Russians have been prosecuting sort of a, if I can't have it, then no one can. sort of a way of war on Kharkiv, and it's hell living there. It's hell. So remember these cities, remember the people, and let's figure out a path to victory.
Thank you so much, Honor. Well, if you've been with us now for this broadcast, you've gotten a real wonderful bird's eye view of what it's like to take a journey through Ukraine in the midst of war up to the battlefront. Honor, your thoughts and observations have been just really, really insightful. I'm excited for our next journey back to Ukraine, which we hope will be in the not too distant future. And
Yeah.
I'd say to all of our viewers which are out there, I hope you are praying people. There is a God that rules in the affairs of men. We need to remember in our prayers the people of Ukraine. We need to be thinking of them. Think of the cities, think of the individuals. This is a defining moment in the history of the modern world. And this war will not only be fought on the battlefield, it will be fought in the media, it will be fought in the cultures, and most importantly, it is held in the hands of the living God. So let's remember that as we move forward here and in all things. For those of you that are our subscribers and our friends of Ukraine Story, I want to encourage you to tell your friends about our work. Or if you're so inclined, send us a cup of borscht. There's a donate button down there below. We'd love to hear from you. We'd be grateful for your support. Our mission is to tell the stories of hope, freedom, faith, defiance, courage, and unity with the people of Ukraine and its relevance to the United States of America and to the world. It's also our mission to combat Russian disinformation, which has a very great stronghold in the West, by providing reasoned, articulate answers to those problems or to those issues, and helping people see the bigger picture. So on behalf of Ukraine Story, this is DW saying thank you very much, and we'll see you on the very next edition of Ukraine Story Podcast.